Commander, it's 3 o'clock, so I don't know if you want to give it a couple minutes or go ahead and get started.
Well, I wanted to just start with a few really introductory remarks that since we met last time in January, obviously the past 6-8 months have been really different and really challenging, I'm sure, for all of us in a myriad of ways. And then this past week I don't even know what to say about the past week between the heat wave and now all the fires. So I just wanted to thank everybody for taking the time today when I know there's a lot of distraction and probably lots of folks are worried about other people they know in California and their animals and everything else. So thank you again for taking the time to join us. And even though I'm sure there's none of them on the call today, I really wanted to express my deep gratitude to the men and women of CAL FIRE and all the people that are supporting them in battling all these blazes. So I also wanted to introduce my co-host for the meeting today. Devi Rao is our County Director for UC Cooperative Extension here in San Benito County. She is also the Livestock and Natural Resources Advisor for San Benito, Santa Cruz, and Monterey counties.
Sitting here on various ones, I'm working on some I'm watching.
And she is, she's actually hosting the Zoom meeting today because she had the proper program, so I'm really grateful to her for that. And then we have Amelia Ryan, who is the vegetation ecologist at Pinnacles National Park. And Amelia has also helped plan this meeting and is helping facilitate. She will be sort of a timekeeper for us today to keep us on schedule. And she will also be monitoring the chat room.
I'm just going to go ahead and mute everybody because there's some extra noises. So I'm going to mute everybody, and then if you're a speaker, you can go ahead and unmute.
Great, thank you, Davey. So we'll continue to admit people to the meeting, but we're going to go ahead and get started. A couple more logistical items. We're recording this meeting. We wanted to be able to provide a link to people who weren't able to make it today, assuming it all goes smoothly and we think the information is useful. We thought that might be something we could provide to other folks on our mailing list. We also ask that you all keep yourselves muted unless you're speaking. Unfortunately, due to the virtual nature of this meeting, it will be much less interactive than when we get together in person. But we hope to make up for that in other ways, which we'll talk about a little bit later. If people have questions during the meeting, like about how your Zoom is working, or if you have a question for one of the presenters, please feel free to put it in the chat box, and Amelia will try to keep an eye on that, and one of the meeting hosts will try to get you an answer if we're able to, and otherwise we will try to follow up with you after the meeting. So I wanted to just give a little bit of background about the San Benito Working Landscapes Group, because we do have quite a few people here who are relatively new in terms of attending one of our meetings. The San Benito Working Landscapes Group is a network of agencies, non-governmental organizations, ranchers, and farmers that partner to find common ground for protecting and enhancing the open working landscapes of San Benito County and adjacent areas. So we do work a little bit in Santa Clara, southern Santa Clara, western Fresno and Merced, as well as southern Monterey County to the south. Our goal is to support the long-term viability of San Benito rangelands while preserving habitat connectivity and making habitat improvements when possible. Put another way, we seek to uphold the economic, cultural, and ecological integrity of local rangelands, and we do that always through voluntary public-private partnerships. And I always like to emphasize the word voluntary. Our part-time contract staff consists of myself and South County resident Lisa Smith, who unfortunately was not able to join us today, but I think many of you in the area know her. I handle the office-based side of things for this network, but Lisa plays a really critical role as our on-the-ground community outreach person in San Benito County. The purpose of our meeting today is pretty straightforward. It's to share information among network participants to encourage collaboration on land conservation efforts in our region. And Amelia, if you want to go ahead and stop the screen share of the agenda, I think I could go ahead and introduce Michael.
Unmute.
And just a reminder to anybody who is not a co-host or our presenter, it would be great if you could keep yourself muted. So today we're very fortunate to have Michael Delbar, who is currently the CEO of California Rangeland Trust, California's largest land trust. In May of this year, Michael stepped into the role of Chief Executive Officer for the Rangeland Trust after having served 10 years as their Chief Operating Officer on the Board of Trustees. Michael hails from a multi-generational ranching family in Mendocino and Lake counties, where they raise beef, cattle, timber, and hay. Prior to joining the Rangeland Trust, he served in a variety of leadership roles. The list is too long to read here, but it included 3 terms as county supervisor, state and national agricultural policy boards, and 2 county farm bureaus. So Michael, we really thank you for joining us today.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. And I know the group has been a great supporter of our projects in the area. So having that support has been real critical to getting those done. So thank you for the invitation to be a part of this today.
Welcome.
So now I get to see how my technical skills are, if I can share my screen successfully. So we wanted to present to you, to the group, the results of our study that we had done by UC Berkeley on the evaluating our ecosystem services, the value and the return on investment of easements that are held by the California Rangeland Trust. So the California Rangeland Trust was started 22 years ago by the California Cattlemen's Association. At the time, there was money available for conservation easements, but no real organization understood the ranching business, and that ranchers felt comfortable getting into a perpetual partnership with. So we started it, cattlemen started it on the thought there might be a handful of ranchers interested in permanently protecting their working ranches. Now, 22 years later, we have over 340,000 acres throughout the state conserved, and another 200,000 acres on our list of projects where we're trying to find the funds to make those a reality for the landowners. So we intrinsically know that the lands we're protecting provide value above and beyond just to the landowner, but to those folks in California that value the open space, the air quality, today would be a little different, the water quality, the food production, all those services. We know that those are of value, but we had a hard time trying to describe in a form that folks could relate to. So we asked UC Berkeley that if they would be able to monetize those ecosystem services. So we contracted with UC Berkeley, with Dr. Lynn Hunsinger, and 2 of her cohorts, Drs. Bam Bustick and Reed Johnson, to take a look and see what's the return on investment and what's the value of these services. So ecosystem services, as most of you are probably aware, but there's several different types. Provisioning, where those are the food, water, raw materials, the services that the land provides. There's the regulating services, waste treatment, climate regulation, nutrient cycling, pollination, of course, habitat, biodiversity, and aesthetics and recreation, and the cultural aspects as well. So UC Berkeley looked at 56 of our easements, and that's not our entire portfolio. They looked at the easements where we purchased those development rights from the landowner, and then they added on the donated easements. We have a number of mitigation easements throughout the state, but we did not include those because we didn't really have the right data to show what that value, the purchased value of those were, because those are acquired differently in the process. So the team looked at 2 types of benefit transfers. The traditional benefits transfer, where they looked at the value to those folks that reside within a 50-mile radius of each project. So they looked at each of these 56 easements, 50-mile radius, and they looked at what's that value to those folks. That was determined to be a day trip within for them to experience the benefits of those particular ranches. Then they looked at the global average. So they used averages from individual ecosystem services, all from all existing reports. The team did not create any new reports or new valuations. They looked at existing data and existing studies. So, and they were able to break that down into three biomes: the grasslands, woodlands, and forests. Now, just in case I forget to touch on it later, because they looked at the existing studies, there were some ecosystem services that they didn't have values for. One that comes to mind and is very pertinent today is fuel load and fuel management. There's no data out there for the benefit of rangelands and grazing for fuel control. And that is something that we'd love to see some data on it. We have to be commissioned a new study to actually develop that. But that's a value that unfortunately just isn't part of the study. So if you look at our results, you can then determine that the numbers that we come up with are actually on the conservative side. So the other thing that the team looked at is they explored the return on investment of the ecosystem services on these rangelands that are conserved in perpetuity. So calculating the ROI, so there's two parts of the study: the ROI, then the valuation of the services. So the ROI in the normal sense of you invest $1, what do you get in return? And what they looked at that in three different ways. They looked at that in a short term, ranches that are developed to their current highest and best use. Then they looked at it from a medium term. What is the development potential under current zoning? And then the long term, what if that ranch was fully developed? Take out the zoning aspect of it, which is a restraint. But if there was no zoning and it was developed to the fullest degree possible. So the short is its current best use is probably grazing and open space and rangeland as it is. Medium term, if they could develop it into 160s or 40s or even 10s or 5-acre lots. And then long term, if it was fully developed. Obviously, the more development, the less there is of the ecosystem services that are provided. Whoops, I'm going the wrong direction, sorry. So when you look at all that together, they did our purchased easements first, like I mentioned, and then they added in the donated easements. Now, obviously on a donated easement, we're not purchasing those development rights. So that return on investment increases because we're not putting money in, but we're sure getting the benefit out. So if you looked at this table, you can see that on the traditional benefit transfer, the TBT, and then the global average, those two lines as you go across. So first we'll talk about the easement ecosystem services. That again, that's how much would a person be willing to pay for the benefit of that open space? How much for food production? How much for that clean air, that clean water, or that wildlife habitat? So if you look at the combination, the last two rows of all of the purchased and donated easements, those 56 easements, that value ranges between $900 million and $1.44 billion a year. A year. That's a recurring value, and that's just on 305,000 acres. That return on investment, those next three columns, that current highest best use, again, assuming that its best use is grazing, it's not for development, there's nothing you can do with it. You can see there, if we look down at the bottom two, we get a return on investment of 8 cents using the traditional benefit transfer, and actually less than that on the global average. Again, because it would probably be just the same, that development pressure wouldn't be there and they couldn't do anything else with it but then graze it. But if you look to the more likely scenario where what could happen with this property under the current zoning, the maximum development under current zoning, and there you can see the dollars returned per dollar invested ranges between $3.43 and $3.47. Now I've made some investments where if I could get $3.50 back for every one I invested, I'd love that. That I don't seem to have that luck in my own investments, but if I could do it here, that would be great. Then if you looked at the full development, and this is the method that a lot of studies use, is what's that full development? What's that return? And you can see that just jumps dramatically up to 167, almost $168 per dollar invested. Quite impressive numbers. But because we wanted to be more realistic and looking at the current zoning, we're using that 343 to 347. So again, I just went through that. This is our key findings of what we came up with there. And so what does all this mean? So like I said, we really had a hard time trying to explain what does this mean to people. They know intrinsically that there's a value to these lands being protected, but how do you explain that to a policymaker? You say, hey, this is a good deal. You should give us the funds, allocate funds for the protection of these working lands. And they go, okay, that sounds good, but how do you measure that? So that was why we really embarked on this study. So now we can go and say, hey, look, you're getting, for 305,000 acres protected, you're getting at least $1.44 billion a year in value to the people of California. That's a huge, huge return. That's something that as a policymaker, you can go to your constituent and say, I support this. Look at this investment's returning us. So there's myriad programs here, both state and federal, that we seek our public funding for the acquisition of easements. You can see them there. The one that we're really using a lot right now is on the state side is the SALT program. That's funded through greenhouse gas emission offsets. Then there's the California Farmland Conservancy Program, both of those through the Department of Conservation. You have WCB that has a Wildlife Conservation Board that has programs. And of course, on the federal side, we have the NRCS AO program. And of course, I see Dan's on here, so I have to mention Bureau of Reclamation, which has been a big, big help for us. So I wouldn't forget to thank you, Dan, and the Bureau for all that support. And then for bonds that are being developed, it's really important that this information be shared with these policymakers. As earlier bonds from 20 years ago, those really put ag land conservation as a priority. Unfortunately, there's money, there's some funds in these later bonds for land conservation, but it's not like it used to be. And we've gotten away from, in my opinion, from the agricultural land aspect of conservation of these newer bonds. We need to hammer home to our policymakers how important it is that these working lands be conserved. As Carmender said, these are voluntary programs. These are voluntary landowners are doing this on a voluntary basis. We don't approach landowners. We don't go to them and say, hey, you should do an easement. This is a great deal. They come to us. So that 200,000 acres that are on our list, those are landowners that approached us and said, I'm interested. I want to do this. That number has been as high as 450,000 acres at one time. Now it's dropped from different reasons. One, we've completed those projects, or unfortunately the land is sold or is transferred and the new owners aren't as interested in it. So we really need to take advantage of these landowners, I don't want to say take advantage of landowners, but take advantage of their desire to get these things done, because that's where now's the time. But without those funding sources, it's really hard to do. And the other thing we would like to do at some point, and we've been talking about it from a policy standpoint, is a stable, consistent funding source. Our partners in Colorado, the Colorado Cattlemen's Agricultural Land Trust, gets a lot of funding from the state lottery program in Colorado. So looking at some sort of a dependable, regular funding source that we can tap into would be a huge help. So this is why we did this study, is again to try to monetize and measure just what this value is to folks. So with that, hopefully I'm staying within the time here, and it's easier to answer questions that folks have, assuming I can answer them. If I can't, I got Alyssa and on board here to help me out.
Great, thank you, Michael. I'm actually wondering if you wouldn't mind during the question and answer section going back to the the slide that had the key findings. There you go. I think the key findings. Because I know that some people, sorry, that was my fault. We started a little tiny bit earlier, like 3 minutes earlier on the presentation than scheduled. So I think actually the slide with the summary findings, was it before or?
This one?
This one, yeah. I think that would be great because I know there's some people just joined the call who will be sorry to have missed that slide. So, so we have a question and answer session. We realized that not everyone has the raise hand option, and with this larger group, we can't always see who's raising their hand. So if you would be willing to enter your question in the chat group, then we can either pass it on to Michael, or Michael, are you able to see the questions in the chat?
I'm not seeing them right now, no.
Okay, well then Amelia will be happy to read those to you.
And I'd also like to add to that, if the full study is available on our website, rangelandtrust.org. If anybody wants to find it on there, it's downloadable, and there's an executive summary as well, so the entire study doesn't have to be read, but those are available on our website.
That's great. I'd be happy to include the links to that when I do the follow-up email for this meeting so that people can access that.
Lynn asks if you could elaborate on the negative ROI.
Sure. Let me go to up one more. So can you see my cursor? Is that showing?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
So this area here is, if you look at a piece of ground that doesn't have development potential, or its highest and best use is grazing, and there you can't develop it. There's no development allowed, or there's nothing. There's no development pressure there, so there's no risk at that land being developed or losing those ecosystem services. So that investment in there, while it's protecting that land in perpetuity, the risk of losing something wasn't as high. So we're not getting that a full dollar back in return. But in reality is that's usually not the case. There's always some sort of development that could occur. So that's really, even though we looked at it from that standpoint, it's not a practical, just as the other extreme, the full development isn't practical.
Mm-hmm.
So the practical solution. Did that help?
Yes, thank you.
The next question is from Pam. She says she's a little confused about the meaning of ROI. If it were developed, are those the ecosystem services that would have been lost?
Yes. That's the value that of those services that would be permanently gone.
If there's anyone who is not able to put their question in the chat room for any reason, I'm going to just scan and see. Go ahead and like put your hand up if you wanted to ask the question in person. We'll see if we can find you there.
Okay, here's another question. I'm not clear who receives the ROI. Is it the individual ranchers, the landowners, et cetera? Or is it more community, et cetera, benefit, like supporting the local grazing economy?
Yeah, it's not a dollar that somebody returned, that they don't have that in their hand. I was just looking to kind of give a better answer for you than. So it's not. How can I explain this? No one's receiving that $3.43. That's the value that would. That's a harder one to explain.
Jump in, Michael.
Yeah, jump in. Save me.
So,
And please introduce yourself.
so I'm Alyssa Rowland. I'm the communications director at the California Rangeland Trust. and I've been helping Michael prepare for this presentation. But just to clarify, so the annual value of ecosystem services is not a value that's returned back to the economy. As Michael said, it was done by the traditional benefits transfer, where people said what value they would place on, say, water, climate regulation, food, that sort of thing. So those ecosystem services. And then in the annual, in the global average method, it was those values were determined by a database that's really wide known. I'd have to check the report for the name of that. But that's how they got those numbers. So the return on investment isn't necessarily a return back into the economy. It's just based on, it's basically showcasing to the funders who helped fund these easements that it's a good investment, that they are protecting these ecosystem services in perpetuity. Hope that makes sense.
Yes, thank you.
And Timothy asks if there's any effort being made to determine the value of fuel load management, noting that Michael mentioned that it hadn't been determined to date in the past.
Yeah, that we're looking to see how that can happen. As you can probably imagine, these studies aren't inexpensive to fund. So we have to find a way to fund it. I know the folks at the team at Berkeley would love to be able to do that, but it would be creating that numbers from scratch, as opposed to the way this was taking existing data. But it would be extremely valuable information to have.
Are there any more questions in the chat, Amelia?
There's no more in the chat right now.
And Davey, are you seeing any by the other method?
I'm not seeing any physical hands up on the screens.
Okay.
If anybody has questions afterwards, they're more than welcome to email us or let us know, and we'll get that information, get those questions answered for you. But we really appreciate the opportunity to share this information with y'all, and our only ask from you is that you take this and share it with those that are making decisions on the funding sources and the availability of funds for working lands conservation.
Great. Thank you so much. Will you be able to stick around for the rest of the hour, Michael, in case people think of questions later? Or and I understand if you cannot stay longer, but
I need to run, but you do have members of my team on here, so
okay.
If there are questions that they can't answer, again, we'll be happy to get that information out.
Great. Thank you again, and best of luck with everything in Lake and Mendocino counties.
Thank you. Take care.
Okay, bye-bye. So we will now move on to just a few announcements regarding the Working Landscapes Group. For those of you who are not familiar with us, we normally meet in person twice a year, approximately twice a year. So normally we would have met in June and again in January. We postponed a little bit this summer, hoping that we would be able to return to in-person meetings, and finally realized that that wasn't going to happen anytime soon. So I'm thinking our next meeting will likely take place in February or thereabouts. Our newsletters, you may have noticed, those of you who are on the mailing list, are not coming out as often as they did in the past. We're now doing them roughly quarterly. But I still welcome suggestions anytime about announcements regarding your programs or your conservation projects, even job postings related to ranching and conservation in this region. Please don't hesitate to send me any of those ideas. Also, if you know other people who are not receiving our communications, feel free to put them in touch with me by email. I can add anyone to the list and also remove them at any time they like. And that list is always kept private. We don't share it with any other organization. Regarding our current projects, conservation projects, the Working Landscapes Group for the past 6 months and longer has been actively participating in several really exciting local efforts, including those led by California Rangeland Trust, Pinnacles National Park, UC Cooperative Extension, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, Point Blue Conservation Sciences Straw Program, and others. Our role with respect to each of these projects and programs is usually in the realm of outreach, conducting outreach to both potential participants and also connecting landowners to those opportunities and connecting them to the agency and organization people that can help them realize their projects. And since you're going to hear directly from several of those organizations in the partner update section, I won't go into detail about any of those, but just know that we're a part of that and pleased to be. So I think with that, we can move on to the partner updates. We're pleased to have about 15 individuals and organizations that agreed to provide 3-minute updates on their programs related to working lands conservation in San Benito and nearby areas today. If we were meeting in person, we would just go around the room and we would be able to have some back and forth during those updates, questions and clarifications. Since this is our first time doing this virtually, we decided to try to be a little more structured. So we actually had people sign up in advance to provide updates. And I will go down the list that was on the agenda that you all received by email yesterday so that you'll have an idea when it's going to be your turn. We do have one additional update that was not on the list I sent yesterday, and that will be from our local NRCS office, the Natural Resources Conservation Service. So if you are interested in what they're up to, please do stick around for that. Amelia has kindly offered to help keep time, and the speakers have been asked to try to limit their update to 3 minutes. Amelia, do you want to play that sound that people will hear if they're running long? Could everybody hear that? If you hear that sound, it means that we would love it if you would finish your sentence and kindly wrap up. We don't have special time slots set aside for questions in response to the updates, but if we do, we're a little bit ahead of schedule, and if we do end up with any time at the end, we'd be happy to take questions for anybody. And we can also monitor the chat, and even if we're not able to address it during this meeting, we can try to get back to you or put you directly in touch with the person who is giving that update. And I think I mentioned earlier, we do plan to send a contact list for all the people giving updates today in a follow-up email. So you'll be able to follow up with individuals that way as well. Davy, did you want to start off with your cooperative extension update?
Sure, thanks, Carminder. Yeah, so my name is Davy Rao, and I'm the Livestock and Natural Resources Advisor for UC Cooperative Extension in San Benito, Monterey, and Santa Cruz counties. And I just wanted to mention a couple of grants that I'm working on right now. We received a large grant from CAL FIRE recently, basically to develop a prescribed burn association in my 3 counties. So between now and March 2024, we will be conducting 5 prescribed burns, at least 1 in each in San Benito, Monterey, and Santa Cruz counties. These burns will be hands-on training burns where the public can learn how to use a drip torch, hand tools, learn about fire safety. We will also be doing several workshops each year for the next 3.5 years, educational workshops for the public and for Prescribed Burn Association members related to fire safety. And so if you're interested in prescribed burning, please get in touch with me. You can put your name in the chat and contact info in the chat, and I can get more information back to you. The second grant we're working on is a grant from the California Cattle Council to look at the influence of livestock grazing on fire safety. So we've already been talking about that a little bit today. We're not going to put dollars on it, but we're trying to get at how much fine fuels, which in livestock terms is forage, how much fine fuels our cattle specifically consuming across the state, and how does that influence flame height and rate of spread of fire. So we should have our results by the end of the month. So keep your eyes out for that. And if you're interested in that, again, please just put your contact information in the chat or just get in touch with me and I'd be happy to share more information with you and get you involved. Thank you.
All right, I guess us. I'm up next, unless you're going to name us all a Carpenter.
Amelia, go ahead.
So I'm Amelia Ryan, and I'm the vegetation ecologist at Pinnacles National Park. Some of you were here at our January, I think it was, meeting, seems like a long time ago, when I talked about the prairie restoration project we're doing at Pinnacles. And that's a project where we hope to look at restoring former grazed ranch lands, restoring habitat there using grazing. We're hoping to restore it for several species, grassland species, and also for some native plant species as well. So we'd like to use grazing as a part of that, and we were hoping to start that experiment this fall. However, COVID has caused some delays in the project, so we're behind where we wanted to be, and we're also planning some in-person workshops and outreach to both share about the project and also gather technical expertise from the ranching and conservation community on these sorts of projects. However, that's been a little bit adjusted, and the park's been a bit focused on dealing with the immediate crisis, and so
Amelia, I think we lost you. Are you coming back? Davey, can you unmute Amelia? Okay.
Yeah.
So maybe, well, she's trying to come back.
now.
Oh, there you are. We lost you for a second.
Okay, let's try from over here. So I'm not sure where I was lost, but we're still going ahead with the prairie restoration project, but we've delayed our time frame by about a year. So we hope to start grazing next year, ideally. And we're working on getting our RFP for grazer operators together, but instead of putting out this summer, we're looking to put out next spring. And then the park itself has a lot of construction projects going on right now. So if you come to the park, you would see that we are in the process of constructing the new entrance station. And we'll also be doing some parking lot paving projects on both the east and west side of the park in the coming few months. And so stay tuned for that. But right now the park is experiencing really poor air quality because of the fires. And so the park's encouraging people right now to be checking air quality before coming to the park if they are, because it's currently unsafe to be outside in the park because of the air quality issues there. So that's pretty much it for me.
Thank you, Amelia. And well, a little bit later in the program, we'll hear from Timothy, who's the cultural resources person at Pinnacles, about some of the projects going on there. So next up is Mark Oganowski with U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service.
Caught me drinking
Oh.
water.
Water.
Hi, everybody. It's nice to see you all, even if it is in little boxes. I'm Mark Oganowski. I'm with U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. I live in, my office is down in Ventura, but a lot of my work is in San Benito County and Monterey County. I do a bunch of different things with the service in San Benito County. They all revolve in some way around endangered species conservation, but I define that very broadly. So I can, if you have any kind of conservation project that involves habitat or natural resources or wildlife, I can usually find some way to help you if you think I can be helpful. And just give you a couple quick examples of things I'm working on now. One of the things that I do is assist with environmental compliance aspects of endangered species. So I'm currently working with NRCS and a couple of landowners in South County who are planning water development projects. And so I'm working with NRCS and the landowners, and along with my colleague Sean Mylar in our partners program, who many of you know also. And we're just trying to help those folks plan their projects so they can avoid impacts to any endangered species and providing right compliance under the ESA. Another thing that I do, and that, that's sort of like in the less fun part of what I do, like I also do more positive, development of conservation projects with folks. And one of those is help landowners explore and fund conservation easements. And so I'm working closely with Carmender, with California Rangeland Trust, and several landowners who are seeking funding to place conservation easements on their ranches. And that can include, in my case, coming out and conducting surveys to see if there's endangered species that might actually improve the chances of funding. I can also, and another thing I'm currently doing with CRT and Carmender and Pinnacles and California Department of Fish and Wildlife, is actually working on a grant proposal through something called Section 6 Recovery Land Acquisition Funds. And so that's another thing that I'm very interested in doing and helping with. So if any landowners out there considering or contemplating conservation easement, especially if you think you might have rare or endangered species, I'm happy to help you think about that, see if your land might be suitable for some of the funding that I'm aware of, and assist in a variety of ways. And then the only other update I wanted to mention, I won't say too much because I'm guessing Ryan might be talking about this, but the Fish and Wildlife Service has proposed to delist an endangered plant called the San Benito evening primrose, which we used to think was only found primarily on Clear Creek. But thanks to Ryan's efforts and those of landowners collaborating with him, it's been found in a lot of other areas. So we're thinking that plant is in really good shape and we can delist it. But as I said, Ryan will say more about that probably. That's it for me. I didn't hear the noise. That was excellent.
No, we're doing good on time.
Thank you, Mark. That was great. And next we have Jenny Benson. She's the Senior Project Manager for the Point Blue Conservation Science Straw Program. And I'll let her tell you what straw is.
Thanks, Carmender. Hi, everyone. Good to see some familiar faces. I hope I can beat the bell because I have a few announcements here. STRAW stands for Students and Teachers Restoring a Watershed. We facilitate community-based habitat restoration projects. And I have a few updates here. First and foremost, I want to introduce to you our newest staff member, Salida Moran, who is also on this call. Salida, go ahead and wave. She is joining the STRAW team as a restoration and education technician and will be working alongside me on projects in San Benito County and South Santa Clara County. And Salida is a recent graduate of Western Washington University, where she studied environmental science and GIS. And she also comes to Point Blue as part of the Ray Conservation Diversity Fellowship Program. That's a mouthful. But what that program does is aim to increase and facilitate conservation-related career pathways for emerging leaders of color. I hope you all get a chance to meet Salida sometime in the near future, and we're just so excited to have her on board, and I wanted to introduce you all to her. My next update is a funding opportunity through the Wildlife Conservation Board's Riparian program. And I've been in touch with Carmender and Mark a bit on this one in terms of outreach to landowners and partnering agencies. And basically we're looking for landowners who are interested in doing riparian restoration projects on your lands, which can include planting and invasive plant removal. The planning for projects such as that would start now, and thinking about student volunteer days could begin as early as next winter, 2021. Point Blue, which is the nonprofit organization that Straw is housed in. As a nonprofit, we're always looking for funding for riparian projects, hedgerows, and more. So if you're a landowner or an agency that is not quite ready to embark on a project but is thinking about it, it's still really helpful for us to know if you'd like to try the Straw program. And that way we can get out for a site visit and just start the conversation and really develop those project goal concepts, hear from you on what you'd like to see on your land, and that way we can have a good idea as funding opportunities come in and we can make those applications. And oftentimes the way we can fund our projects are of little cost to landowners. And then in addition to the restoration work that Straw does, we also pay really careful attention to our community partnerships and nurturing our teacher network. So a recent community partnership that has developed, which we've called Strengthening Partnerships Group, really clever name for that group. Anyway, this group was initiated by Amanda Chiato of San Benito Arts Council and I. And we initiated this back in April with the idea of exploring the overlap between all the awesome programs that are providing education type programming to the various schools in San Benito County. And we're currently, these meetings are currently hosting folks from Reach Foundation, Terra Cultura, San Benito Water District, Recology, Carminder has attended as well, and more. And we're meeting about every 6 weeks on Zoom and just kind of thinking, what are these next steps to kind of streamline our education programming in the area. And one idea we've come up with is collecting all the resources from these various programs and coming up with sort of a one-stop shop resource that we could provide either to school districts or county office of education, something like that. And there's some great ideas that are spawning from these meetings. So if you know of anybody that should be a part of these conversations, let me know and I can send you more information. And then real quickly, last update is Straw held our virtual teacher training event and networking event that we called Watershed Week. And this was held in early August. Some of you may have gotten the invite for this training. Anyway, this is a training that focused around social and emotional learning and connections to environmental education. So helping teachers, not only students, but also teachers being socially and emotionally aware in their teaching and facilitating that. And of the 45 teachers that joined on this virtual seminar, we actually had one San Benito County teacher and one Santa Clara County teacher join. And I know that doesn't sound like a lot, but it's inspiring me that we can reach a bigger geographic range of our teacher network by hosting these virtual seminars. So we're not traveling all over the place, and better use of time. But anyway, that's it. And let me know if you have any questions.
Thank you, Jenny. So I actually accidentally skipped over Gavin Kakel. Do I pronounce your name right, Gavin? Let's see.
Kakel, close enough.
Kakel, thank you.
All good.
And he's Land Transaction Manager with California Rangeland Trust.
Well, hello, everybody. Thank you for having me today. In the past, we used to have Jeremiah Leibowitz representing us with this group. He has since moved on, and I'd like to introduce you all to Jackie Flatt. She's our new transaction director. So I think part of the reason why sometimes our deals take a long time or we have a very large active waiting list is just staff turnover. But I'm happy to say that I think that we got a battle rhythm going, and I think in the coming months here, we're going to get a lot done. So if anyone has any hesitation about working with us, I encourage you to give it a second thought. As far as our updates go, in 2019, we had worked with BOR and WCB to facilitate the easement of Willow Creek Ranch, which was a 5,458 acre working lands project. And I'm sure many of you were involved in that, so thank you very much. We're still getting we still have a lot to do in San Benito County. We have 6,500 acres currently being looked at for 3 different projects. The first project is a mitigation easement just outside of the city of Hollister. It's approximately 566 acres, and it's going to be protecting the California red-legged frog, San Joaquin kit fox, and California tiger salamander. And we think that it can get done this year, so we're very excited about that. Another project we're working on is a 1,500-acre ranch located just outside of Pinnacles. It might actually be adjacent. And this is a collaboration between CRT, U.S. Fish and Wildlife, the California Department of Fish and Wildlife, and the San Benito Working Lands Group. So that's some very positive traction there. And next one, Mark had already alluded to this. It is another conservation easement, about 4,500 acres, 3 miles outside of Pinnacles National Park. And again, we're working with the same group of agencies to get a Section 6 non-traditional grant going with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife, which we are very hopeful for. And we are looking forward to doing a full proposal this fall. So that about covers it for now. Hoping to have a lot more projects in the future. If anyone has any questions, let me know.
Thanks a lot, Gavin. That's all really exciting stuff. So next on the list was Dina Iden, Executive Director of the Loma Prieta Resource Conservation District. She contacted me earlier today and said that she was very busy evacuating livestock. She still wanted to try to make it. I told her, please take care of the important stuff first. But it looks like she has not been able to join us, so hopefully she's doing well. And I'll move on to the next presenter. Kathy, are you there? I saw you somewhere. Kathy Spencer, there you are. Davey, can you unmute her? I can't unmute her for some. Davey, are you still there? There you go.
Can you hear me?
Yep. We can only
No.
see you. We can hear you, but we can't see all of you.
Oh, you can't hear. Oh, okay. I can't. I don't.
We can hear you, Kathy. Go ahead.
You can?
Yeah, go ahead.
Speak up, Kathy.
Okay. You can hear the telephone?
That's okay.
Can you hear me?
Yes. Yep. We can hear you and the telephone.
Okay. Okay. Well, here's me, and then Lisa's over there. We're self-distancing. Yes. Yeah, we've had a very, very, very active spring and summer. We've not had to deal with the coronavirus as we've been, because we're just keep going with the cows and everything. But there's been some interesting developments, like in the whole beef industry has kind of changed a little bit, where people are now slaughtering their own cattle and selling them from the ranches. And they had a discovery where if they could sell five a month as long as they sold them live to people. So that bogged down our butcher, and it took us into July before we could actually take our grass-fed beef to the butcher. But it's been a really hectic year. I was working with grass-fed beef customers at the same time I was calving, so it was kind of a mess, but very interesting, kind of fun, doing something different. I had customers come to the ranch as far as San Francisco to pick up their beef. It was great talking to everybody, and everybody's, I think, really glad to get out for a ride in the country.
Mm-hmm.
That's about it. Lisa?
Awesome.
Nope, I got nothing.
She's got nothing.
I find that hard to believe. What about baseball? No, we better not talk about that.
Not much. I'm saving money.
Okay, thank you guys.
Okay.
Next up, we have Christopher Hauser with the Panoche Valley Preserve and Center for Natural Lands Management. Go ahead, Chris.
Thank you, Carmenter. Thanks for having me. Again, my name is Chris.
and I'm one of 2 preserve managers on the Panoche Valley Preserve. We are located in far eastern San Benito County in the Panoche Valley. We own about half of the Panoche Valley and then up into the foothills in 3 of the 4 directions, a little bit of Little Panoche Valley. The preserve, again, both my co-worker and I work for the Center for Natural Lands Management, which is a statewide land trust. We have preserves all over the state. The preserve is about 2 years old, and it's the result of off-site mitigation for the Panoche Valley Solar Project, which is about a 2 square mile photovoltaic solar plant. The preserve itself is 26,400 acres, and we're managing it for those San Joaquin Desert ecoregion species, including giant kangaroo rat, blunt-nosed leopard lizard, San Joaquin kit fox, and San Joaquin antelope squirrel. And so that's why the preserve is there, and it's set aside in perpetuity for those species and lots of other species, lots of other rare plants and animals out there. We've done a lot of infrastructure improvements over the last couple of years. We fixed up a house. We've been repairing and improving water systems for livestock, and we're going to replace about 29 miles of fence and a set of corrals this fall. So we have a lot of fixing up to do. It's been years since any of that work's been done on some of those ranches. Most of our stewardship is through the grazing. We graze every single square inch of the preserve that we can, because that's how we maintain the habitat for those desert species. Although we do a little bit of prescribed burning, a little bit of weed spraying, it's mostly the grazing that does what we need it to do. And we're sort of in the middle of a bunch of monitoring. So we monitor all those species, and I'm out mapping rare plants, and we're kind of in the middle of our summer small mammal monitoring season right now. So I think that's it. Appreciate the opportunity, and if anyone has any questions, I think my email's in the email list, so go ahead and send me emails. Appreciate your time.
Thank you, Chris. Yeah, and I'll also include all your contact info in the list that I'll send out following the meeting.
Perfect, thank you.
So next up, we have Ryan Odell with the Bureau of Land Management. And Ryan, your title's long, so I'll let you say it. There you go. Oop.
Whoa.
There you go.
You guys, can you hear me?
Yes.
Can you hear me now? Okay.
Yes.
Sorry about that. That's a cool glitch. So I'm the natural resource specialist for BLM Central Coast Field Office. Our office is in Marina, and my background is botany and soil, so kind of similar to Chris Hauser there, roaming around like no chills and other areas. So major things that kind of happened in our field office area, as Mark mentioned, there's a proposed delisting for San Benito evening primaries. And partnerships basically with some private landowners in South County were pretty instrumental actually in terms of achieving that, because they were nice enough to give me permission to service their lands. They don't want to be named, but they were very important basically in being able to find more of the species and to actually achieve recovery. So office definitely extends our thanks to those unnamed private landowners in South County for that species. Other major things going on in our office is that we're finalizing the resource management plan amendment for Cotoni Coast areas. Our piece of BLM land down near Davenport. And I think that's supposed to be posted to the public within at least the next week or few weeks on that. It's been a very active fire season for our BLM lands. We had some earlier fires, including the large mineral fire, Coalinga Mineral Springs. And then most recently, we have many major fires basically going on in our BLM lands, which the largest ones currently is the one that's Sierra de Salinas. I don't know the name of the river fire. Is burning very close to Dome lands there. There's a very large fire that's actually burned part of Chautauqua Costeries and continues to burn in Santa Cruz Mountains. And we also have another fire out of Del Puerto Canyon. So it's a very active fire season on all of our BLM lands. I think I'll leave it at that. That's pretty much summarizes it.
Thank you, Ryan. So next we have Lynn Overtree. She's actually on the agenda twice today. In this first presentation, she's representing the San Benito Fire Safe Council.
Yeah, and thanks a lot. That's great seeing everybody. And that was a great presentation earlier. Thanks for getting CRT on there. In terms of the Fire Safe Council, I just wanted to say that there really hasn't been much activity. And so it has been driven by people who have had interest in it, which has been the San Juan Canyon community for several years. And a lot of work has been done here, and with the not being able to meet in person, there's just, you can tell there's just lost all its momentum. But I wanted to emphasize that the organization structure is still there. And so if other communities within the county want to take advantage of that, I would encourage them to, and you're welcome to get in touch with me and I can help you connect into it. But other areas that have really high fire hazards are identified as aromas in the Cienega Canyon area, but there may be areas in South County too. So I just want to bring that to your attention, that the organization is there and can be used as a tool if it's something that interests you. That's it.
Great, thank you. And we'll come back to you later for the
Thanks.
San Benito Agricultural Land Trust update. So next we have Pam Crone.
That's good.
She's Agricultural Water Quality Coordinator with the California Marine, sorry, Pam.
Sanctuary.
I'll let you take it from there.
So I am the water quality coordinator for the California Marine Sanctuary Foundation. And one of the water quality attributes of the ocean that's of big concern to us is the carbon dioxide that gets absorbed into the ocean and causes ocean acidification, as well as the global warming that causes an increase in ocean temperature. And so I've been trying to find ways to mitigate that. And of course, the California Department of Food and Agriculture came out with their Healthy Soils program, which is a carbon mitigation, carbon sequestration program into working lands. And those working lands include both ranches and also any kind of farm production, crop production. So now I have 3 Healthy Soils program grants that I'm managing. And the first one was on 2 small ranches, both in the Elkhorn Slough watershed near Watsonville. And we're coming into our 3rd and final year of that grant program. And I'm just interested to report to you that we had some positive results from the program. We had increased soil organic matter in all of our, both of the ranches. One ranch had 3 different treatment options that they tried. One was in an oak woodland, one was on irrigated land that they also did some seeding on, and the third was just on unirrigated land, just with no seeding. And both of the practices that we tried were compost addition and hedgerow addition. And so on the compost addition, we actually saw increases in soil organic matter, interestingly enough, on both the treatment and the control plots, the plots where we did nothing, although there was more increase on the treatment plots. But I think the way that I've explained this to myself is that the ranchers improved the soil health across their whole land. So with that improvement in soil health came an improvement an increase in soil organic matter, and it can partly be attributed to compost, partly probably to climate, and just that the first year we started was a really dry year, so we had low soil organic matter. But partly it can be attributed, I think, to their improvement in management practices as they became more aware of soil health and how to increase soil health, so that they had more plants and they had more plants on the land basically. And we also saw an increase in peak standing biomass, but only on the compost plots in that case. But I think that across the whole area, we did see that they were paying more attention to soil health, and that resulted in the increase in soil organic matter. The third healthy soils practice ranch that we'll be starting on is Mark's Ranch, which is in Salinas, and that's a ranch owned by the Big Sur Land Trust. And they have an area that's been degraded from the use of fire equipment that's compacted the soil in that area. So they want to both try seeding of native plants and also compost addition to see if they can improve that and bring it back to grazing land so that it can be used for grazing land. It was too degraded really to be useful the past few years, so they've only used it as kind of getting cattle to market, but not for grazing the cattle. So I'm really going to be interested to see Amelia's project and what you guys can accomplish and how you try to accomplish that and what we can learn from what you do so that we can bring your knowledge and expertise and learning into some of the things that we might try with grazing on Mark's Ranch, as well as learning kind of the do's and don'ts about how to reestablish some of the native species, because the more I've read about it, maybe the more confused I've become.
Thank you, Pam.
From this group. So anyway, thank you.
Thank you. Iris Nolasco, let me unmute you. Iris is the Central Coast Program Coordinator with California Farm Link.
Hey everybody. So California Farm Link is a nonprofit and a community financial development institute, and we focus on lending, education, and access to land. So on our loan side, this year has been pretty busy with COVID and shutdowns, and we've invested about $600,000 in 13 different loans. And most of those are to farmers of color. And we've also administered the Paycheck Protection Program to our farmers and ranchers. And so in the loan scope, we'll be working on the forgiveness part of that next. And in the meantime, we've also just been working on new strategic initiatives, including new programming for Black, Indigenous, people of color, focusing more on wealth building, so that we're looking at a holistic framework for accruing wealth and assets and not just at the farm or ranch business. We're working on resilience and succession and redoing our succession guidebook, and our third initiative is equity on conservation lands. And currently we are working with Tomcat Ranch on a regenerative grazing and lease guide. Lease and easement guide. And that publication is to support landholders in incorporating regenerative language and outcomes into their leasing and grazing plans. We may or may not tease out the easement section of that into a different publication, but landholders can be civilian, land trust, public agencies, or institutions. And it can also be a resource for tenant ranchers and grazers. And then on another related note, we also host a land portal for landowners and land seekers to connect. And we don't get a lot of ranching and grazing folks, but I do have a goat grazer looking for 10 acres of land to lease for his permanent base. So if anyone knows of property primarily in the Central Coast area, but might be interested in San Benito or a little bit inland, please feel free to contact me.
Great, thank you, Iris. Lynn, would you like to give your San Benito Agricultural Land Trust update?
I would like to. So I'm gonna hit my timer, keep myself under 3 minutes. So we have a couple of grant-funded projects that we're working on. There's an internal agricultural conservation plan that we're working on that we're going to try to prioritize projects within the county. And so I welcome input from any of you guys who either know of high priority areas for conservation of farmland or rangeland, or if you know of other resources or plans that have been done that you can feed toward me, that would be awesome. We are also looking for, let me see, partners to help identify materials to ensure we're working on a grant that funds us to work with underserved farmers and ranchers, and we're doing this with FarmLink and Iris. And so if any of you guys know of individuals who are trying to either improve or enter farming and ranching that are in those underserved communities, we would love to learn more about it. And we're trying to gather information materials together that we can then provide to people so they have a better understanding of conservation options through easements and the benefits of doing conservation to improve greenhouse gas reduction goals and that kind of thing. So again, if you have some input, that would be fantastic, or if you want to participate on that team. I am going to read verbatim this next section because this is not from me specifically, but our board is working with city and county planners to evaluate the negative impact effects, or just the effects in general, of San Benito County zoning of prime ag land as a 5-acre minimum. And so we're looking for, in general, once if you subdivide down to 10 or 5 acres, the market is mostly residential and with the cost of land too high for most agriculture. So when you have a requirement for productive agriculture on prime land that can be too small to support a farm family, even if some specialty crops are theoretically possible to farm. So one of the examples is the Brentwood region in Contra Costa County, which made some of their small subdivisions some of their land zoning became so small that only subdivisions were possible. So we would love to get input for two basic things. What is the minimum acreage generally recognized as sustainable, as viable for productive agriculture? So if you have input on that, that would be great. And how, oops, I'm out of time. How San Benito County can update its ordinances to address these various issues. And the last thing I was going to say is that we're looking for more expertise on our committees. And so if you have people or you are interested in being involved in the land trust, we would love to hear more from you.
Great, thank you.
I did my 3 minutes.
We have, land trust has a lot going on. So, Timothy Babelis is Cultural Resources Program Manager with Pinnacles National Park. Can you unmute you, Timothy? Davey, it won't let me in. Oh, there we go.
Okay. Sorry, Timothy, you're still muted. Maybe it'll be easier if you just unmute yourself.
There we go.
Did that work? Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, yep, the symbol's off. Hi, everybody. Thanks for having me. It's good to be here. So I'm, in addition to being the Cultural Resources Program Manager for the park, I'm also the historian, park historian, and have been doing history down in South County for probably about 15 years now. I just want to briefly give an update of some of the cultural resource projects that are going on at the park that might be of interest to folks with this group. And first of all, I want to give an update on the Bear Valley School. I know a lot of people, that's a great interest to a lot of people in South County. This was this is the one-room schoolhouse just outside. Well, it's actually in the park, but it's just outside our main entrance, and of course, still sitting vacant. It is our #1 priority for restoration, and our hope is to restore the building and to bring it back into service of some sort, as well as improving the structure. But we actually were on schedule to begin our restoration process this year in 2020. And then of course, 2020 happened. And the Park Service, many of the parks, including Pinnacles, lost our entrance fee revenue source. And we were depending upon that. That was one of our major sources that we were depending upon for the restoration of the schoolhouse. And we've had to postpone that. So I'm kind of sorry to convey that information. But as I said to begin with, it remains our #1 priority in cultural resource projects, and we're hoping that we may be able to pick up where we left off in the upcoming year, in the next year. And with the recent passage of the Great American Outdoors Act, a major funding source that Congress recently passed and the President signed, we're keeping our fingers crossed that that may actually make it possible. So that's where that stands. Another thing that I want to mention is we have an ongoing history. It's actually a physical history or historic structure report for the Ben Bacon Ranch. So that's just as you come into the park, all that the bottomlands area, the old ranch land that you see there, that's within the park boundaries, is the Ben Bacon Ranch, and we have a cluster of the original ranch buildings as well as the farmland. Now this is the land that Amelia has been working on, and she mentioned where we'll be experimenting with grazing leases for managing the vegetation out there in conjunction with the native plant restoration. But we're also working, from my side, we're working on perhaps restoring the historic buildings associated with the ranch as well. And to kind of provide the foundation for that restoration work, we're completing a history of the buildings. Now, that's still in process, so we're winding up the project now. I wanted to ask, just kind of put out the request there, if anybody has any, or knows anybody who has any historic photographs associated with the Ben and Ora Bacon, the Bacon family, or any information that would help us to understand better the history of those properties, please let me know. And I bring that up now because I was actually going back through some old probate records and discovered that when the property was auctioned off following Ora Bacon's death in 1941, those auction materials included several boxes of photographs, of family photographs. And I know that they stayed within the family. So again, if anybody knows what's happened with that or knows of any other sources of information, now would be an excellent time for us to see those, just to help us with the restoration project as we're planning on that. So that's, those are two of the main projects I wanted to mention. A third that's a little bit peripheral, but I think is pretty exciting and is worth telling folks. We're starting on, actually within a couple of weeks, we'll be starting on a multi-year ethnographic history of Native American people in this region in San Benito County and nearby counties. And we have two anthropologists from Portland State University and CSU Fresno who will be doing this study, and they'll be working closely with the American Indian tribes of this region. So that'll be fascinating too. That'll be very interesting. And those are the main things that I have. Again, thanks for having me.
Thank you, Timothy. That's all really interesting and ties into some of the other work we're doing. So thank you. Thank you for coming today. So next we have Kyle. Are you there, Kyle? I think I saw you. Kyle,
I am. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yep. And
all
we
right,
can see.
I want to make sure my fan isn't blowing the doors down.
How do you say your last name, Kyle?
Vanel.
Vanel. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, not a problem. So I have a few updates from the Hollister NRCS office. So all of Area 2, NRCS being all the Bay Delta counties, as well as the Central Coast counties, are working at full telework right now, but we're still functioning completely. And within those functions, We're doing field visits, socially distant with masks on, of course. And we're working on finishing up some funding contracts through EQIP and through CSP currently. We don't have the dates for our fiscal year 2021 programs yet. Once those are made available, they'll obviously be sent out to the community. Inside of that, NRCS is also being tasked with working with the local RCDs, so San Benito, Loma Prieta, and Guadalupe Coyote in Santa Clara County, to create some local work group meetings. We don't have dates for that. It was supposed to be this summer. Obviously, plans didn't quite work out as we wanted them to. So we're planning on moving that to the fall, and dates are going to be coming out. We're still working on trying to get all of that set up. And then as far as emergency funding, right now we don't have any funds being put in place for the emergency watershed protection programs or for the catastrophic fire programs. However, I anticipate that in the next few weeks, those programs and that funding will be made available through NRCS and for all those affected counties. And I think that's just about it. Just a few quick updates from us. We also have a new employee in the Hollister office, and I'm going to segue over to Katie White, who's also on the call. So Katie, you can go ahead and speak up and introduce yourself.
Hi, everyone. My name is Katie White. I just got hired by the Hollister NRCS office as a soil con. I actually grew up here in Hollister. I'm from here. It's really exciting to see familiar faces again. And I went to Cal Poly to got my undergrad degree there and then came back. So excited to be back in the area. And with that, I'll pass on to whoever's next.
Awesome. Welcome, Katie. We're really excited to have you. We were excited when Kyle was hired, and now we're excited again. So great to have you guys. That's actually, unless Karen Overstreet joined the call. David, did you see if Karen is with us, our local agricultural commissioner? She was a maybe, and so I don't see her.
I don't see her.
Okay, and Ken Griffin is also, I don't see him either.
Yeah.
So I think that's it for the updates. This has never, ever happened in the history of a Working Landscapes group meeting before. Those of you who've been around know, but we actually wrapped up 3 minutes early for this section. So if there are any questions for anybody, if people can quickly put that in the chat, or I think we can see most of you now. If you want to wave to us, we can unmute you and let you ask a question or make an announcement if you weren't on our scheduled list. Any takers for that? Okay. So with that, I think we can just move on to our final piece here, which was to do one of those fun instant polls. Again, we've never done a meeting this way before, and I was trying to put it off for as long as possible until I finally had to face the reality that we had to do it this way. So we would love your honest feedback on this instant poll. Here it is. Thank you, Davey. And I'll just mention to everyone that these polls are anonymous, so you really can be honest, and no one will see the cumulative results, but we will not see who answered a certain way. So if you're new to Zoom or a reluctant Zoomer like me, you won't be outed if you say you had difficulties.
Okay, I just shared results.
Oh, wonderful. Wow, it almost seems like it was rigged. Okay, great. Thank you, everyone. If you have any specific feedback about this meeting or suggestions for topics for future guest presentations, please do email me at any time and let me know. Likewise, if you think of any questions you'd like to put to any of these presenters, we can get you connected to them. And in a day or so, might be Monday at this point, but I will get a contact list out to you with everyone's contact information who was on the agenda today, and as well as the link to the online full version of the California Rangeland Trust Ecosystem Services Study. And I believe they also have a webinar that might be longer and might have involved the researchers. And so if I can find that link, I will include that in the follow-up email as well. Thank you all very much for coming. I still can't believe we're ending early. But unless Davey or Amelia, did you have anything else to add? Did I forget anything?
I don't think so. Thanks everyone for joining. Good call.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thanks so
Bye,
much
everybody.
for organizing this. This is great.
Please stay safe, everyone. I'm wishing the best for all of you. And I have a barn loft apartment with separate entrance in case anyone has evacuees. That it's very smoky here, but at least we have a place to stay. So take care. Bye.
Thanks.
Bye.
Take care, everybody.
Thank you very much.